Okay, we're going to be working on Unit 1 here today, and since this is really our first unit of instruction that has any like real weight or merit to it in the course, I want to begin by talking about how I structure my course shells. So the first thing I'm going to point out is just going back to the home page of the course shell here, that my courses do not land on the announcement page like a lot of instructors' courses do. And we have this capability as instructors here to customize our course shells anyway, and thank goodness, because being a web guy, I have very clear visions of what I want to present on a web page. And my general mindset is clean and simple is often the most effective way to put content on the screen. And case in point would be like Google, right? And Google came out, and instead of like crowding their pages with all sorts of nonsense, they just kind of got to the point, and it was black and white and clear and very concise. And no wonder it worked, right? So people like that because you're just seeing the stuff that you need to see. And that's how I try to do my course shells. So all my course shells will land on a home page, not the announcements page. And the home page will have direct links to all the units of instruction right off of the main page. In addition, every time I add a unit, you will notice that it will also come up on the left sidebar. The thinking is this: one click to get to anywhere in the course you need to go. One click, not two, not three, not one folder into another, into another. I'm not a fan of that, right? Because people get lost and they don't know where they are. So, for example, this first unit of instruction, I could be, let's say, maybe looking at the discussion board. Hey, I want to go to Unit 1. There I am, and straight there. When you get into one of the units of instruction, I have a certain pattern that I follow. Once again, not like what some other instructors do. My approach is pretty simplistic. I put at the very top what we're doing in this unit. And in this case, here are the topics I want to talk about. They're listed. If I have auxiliary files that go with, in this case, the author's PowerPoint, I will attach it. In some of the subsequent chapters, I will take all of the in-chapter code examples and link them up as well so that you guys can access that. Now, as you scroll down through the unit, you'll notice some more things. The first thing you'll notice is I usually below the topics will have a posting of videos. And because I am pretty prolific with recording them, I have like huge archives of them. All of them do ultimately push to YouTube, my YouTube channel, if you look it up. And then I add stuff as we go. So like right now, you'll notice I have a little blurb here saying that, hey, videos will be added after I create them. The ones that are in here now are from previous semesters, previous classes. Not that they're not relevant, right? The times have changed, but the material's kind of the same. So if you want to plow ahead and just watch those videos and not watch the new one, hey, go for it. But I will add, like the one I'm recording now will show up here in this unit folder, right at the top. And I usually will put a little new thing next to it so you can see it. And I always timestamp that. Then we move on to the assignment portions. And see, I, once again, turn off all these like goofy little features that Blackboard has with these like goofy margin icons. And I put in my own little graphics so that it's really, really clear to you guys. So I have this like red, yellow flag there that says assignment. That means you need to do this. It's worth points. So that's kind of my way of saying, hey, do it, right? And you will notice that the way that I list the assignments, I typically will have, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, usually right at the top of the assignment in big, bold green letters, green to be positive, basically, the main point of what you're doing. And so for this first one, it says, take the following online quizzes and report your results. That's what you're doing. Now, as you scroll down here, there might be links or instructions, but typically it'll say, do this, do this, do this, do this, turn it in like this, and good luck. Hopefully you get all your points. And these are a couple of examples. So the one that, and we're going to do this one in class today in just a little bit, which is the pre-tests from W3 schools. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then a couple of other assignments. Hopefully get through all of these today, maybe even here in class. this is probably the one that you'll want to think about a little bit. But one of the things that we will do in this class, for example, is by the time we get to the end, I'm going to expect you as your final project to build a website that you want to build around whatever theme you want to build it around. And as you do that, you know, if you're going to build something, kind of like building a house, you don't just like go to Menards and buy the 2x4s and some hammer and nails and start building. You make a plan first, like what am I going to build? I make a blueprint, I make a drawing, I do measurements, and then I build based upon the design. And we're going to go through that whole process. So I'm going to show you how to design, and then you will give me a couple of ideas. So what you will do here, so this is pretty typical, I provide a bullet list of what you should do, give me a bullet list of possible project possibilities. So if you have a couple of ideas, it's like, oh man, I want to build a Battlefield 5 website. I have people who do that kind of stuff all the time. You're welcome. Or maybe, if you're into playing violin, right? Maybe you have a violin website or whatever your thing is. And just to put down the thought, the reason that we do this, right, is you have to get it in your head first before you can build it. If you're not, it's kind of like driving a car. If you don't look down the road to where you're going, you're not going to get there. You have to know where you're going first. And that's kind of the point of it. But anytime I will have an assignment in the course shell, it will have this flag. And then to submit the assignment, you will click the title link. So the part, and what I have done in mine, okay, so this is a web design thing again, is in most people's course shell, this link will be black text. It doesn't look like a link. So I change all mine to like a link color, sort of, real close. And you'll get to a submission screen like this, where it will reiterate the instructions and show you the due date. So some of you will say, well, Ty, why don't you list the due date right in the description? And I do that because that way, when I copy paste my courses from one semester to the next, I don't have to go in there and change every one. They're here in the background. So if you want to see the due date for something, you click on the title, it'll show you the due date. It will also show you the point value. So this particular one is due by Friday, September 10th at midnight. That's quite a ways. That's almost 2 weeks away, right? Well, 10 days, something like that. So you have plenty of time on this, so you can really mull it over before you decide to submit. So I'm hoping that you give me a few different ideas, but read what it says. And then here, in this case, some people will opt to create a Word document, and some people will prefer to use some of the built-in tools. So this is really asking you to brainstorm. So the one thing that you could do is you could write a submission to this and type up your stuff right here. That's one way you could do it. Another way that you could do it, and what I would prefer for most things where you're asking for a written response, is go to Microsoft Word or Google Docs. If you are using Google Docs to create a document, my kind request is use Google Docs and then convert it to a Word document, and I have a reason for that. So let's say I'm in Google Docs, I'm in my email, and I come over here to what we call, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this. First of all, you can move those around, but this little icon, you know what the official name for that icon is? The waffle icon. I kid you not, that's what the people at Google call it. They call it the waffle, right? I call it the apps thing, whatever. But that's how you get to all your Google apps. You can go to Google Docs, and then it brings up that word processor on your screen, create a new document, type up your stuff, whatever you typed up, whatever your answer is. And then when you're all done, give it a title, whatever that is. Then you can come up here to the file, and you can go to the download feature and download it as a Word document. Once you have it downloaded, then you can submit this file to Blackboard. Now, the reason I ask for it that way is when you submit Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and a few other formats, like the standard kind of formats, PDFs work too. When I go to Blackboard to grade it, it just shows up in the window directly. I don't have to download it, open it, and do that whole routine. Blackboard just shows it to me. That's why I ask for it. So if you're a Google Docs person, don't send me a link to your Google Doc. send me a Word document, right? That's my preference. If you're using Microsoft Office, so let's talk about that actually real quick. Remember we did in the previous class, we went to the Gateway website, you went to your My Gateway, and you have the capability here to get to Microsoft Office 365 through your web browser. So the same way that you use the Google Docs. So you can click on this and it will get you logged in. And then you can come over here to the side and hit your little Word icon. And kind of looks a lot like the Google Docs thing, right? Create a new document. There's your word processor. Type in your stuff, you know, and you're done. And really, you can come up here and export or save as and get that Word document once again to submit. You don't have to install any software, and that's what's really cool about Office 365. If you're curious, though, and a lot of people do get curious, and they're working in this environment, I want you to be aware that there's this button up here that allows you to install Office, right? So you guys all get a free copy as a student of Gateway. You get a free copy of Office 365 that you can download and install on up to 5 machines. I want you to think about that. That's pretty awesome. Now, there's a catch, right? The catch is once you're done and graduated and you're no longer a student with an active student email account, that goes away. You know, so you lose the license at that point. But while you're a student, I mean, once again, this is an expensive piece of software. Most people who like personally pay for it are paying a subscription fee. I don't even know what the cost is these days. But don't neglect to take advantage of this. If you have a machine that doesn't have enough hard drive space to download and install it, don't. Just do it through the browser. There's plenty of people that get by just doing that. I'm doing an experiment right now on my school laptop. This is not my school one, by the way, where I did not install Microsoft Office to see if I could make it through a semester without installing it, you know, and see if I could swing with it, you know, and so far so good, but it's the first day, right? But I think eventually I'll probably install it. But this is kind of cool. The other advantage to installing Office is that it also creates a Gateway OneDrive account, which gives you more cloud storage. We will talk about all those things as we go along. I just want to kind of hit the highlights on that. Any questions on any of that for the moment? All right, so that's just really kind of circling back to talking about how to turn in homework. Let's say that you have completed this project and it comes time to turn in a document. So if you're turning in a document, the thing that you do is you use this dotted box here to do that. So you can click on the button, it would bring up the file dialog. You can find the file that you're looking for and attach it. The other really cool way that this works, and I've been doing this more and more and more and more, is you can bring up that dialog, and if I find a Word document, you can just drag and drop it into that box. It turns purple and it attaches. You know what? At first I was like, oh, that's really dumb. Now it's like, that's what I do every time. Because I think it's so much easier than like navigating your whole file system, especially if you have the window open where you're already at, right? So that's a really easy way to do it. You will notice as well that they added a button just recently, I think in the last 6 months, something like that, where if you use Google Drive or OneDrive or SugarSync or Box or any of those like Dropbox, any of those services, you can link it up here. So you can log into your Google Drive, for example, and bring in a document that way. So that's a possibility as well. The other thing that I always tell people is if you have something to say about your assignment, you can type in a brief comment here, but often what works better is to use the Write Submission button instead. And the reason for that is the Write Submission button is a rich text editor, so you can make it bold, italic, indent, paste in links, and all sorts of stuff. The comment box is super primitive, so if you got a lot to say, don't put it there. If you have anything to say here, it's like, I fixed it, you know, or something like that. That's the kind of thing you should put there. All right, so when you're all done and ready to submit your work, you just hit that submit button, and then I will get it. In your grade book, then, if you go over here and you look at your My Grade area, once you've submitted an assignment and it's fully submitted, you will get a gold circle in the list here. So if you did your syllabus acknowledgement, you'll have a gold circle here, meaning that you submitted it fully and it's waiting to be graded. If you have a blue circle instead, that means it's not fully submitted. What you probably did is this, is you probably hit the link and then you probably hit save draft by mistake. It happens all the time. And then it's saved for you, but I can't see it. And what you see in your grade book is a blue circle instead. And if I can't grade your stuff, I'll send you an email and say, hey, your circle's blue. Can you hit submit instead of save draft, and I'll get it. Sometimes it also indicates a problem, but although those are fairly rare. But that's kind of the anatomy of how to deal with that. Also the anatomy of what a typical unit of instruction looks like. But what I'm going to do here just really quick is I'm going to once again lift the veil to show you the whole course and kind of go a couple units farther down the line and just kind of give you an example of some of the additional stuff that I throw in. So video links, archive videos, meaning my older links, what assignments look like, and then what extra credit assignments look like. So if I offer an extra credit opportunity, I have a separate flag I put on that. So that means you don't have to do this. However, if you do it, I will indicate that you can get some extra points for it. How many extra points? This one looks like it's a 2-pointer. So it's one of the extra case studies, not a requirement to do. Hey, but some people have time to burn or are really good at it and want something more challenging. So I throw in extra credit opportunities. And remember, extra credit opportunities count positively. There's no negative impact on your grade, so it never hurts to do it. Every once in a while, and I'm not seeing any in this particular, I'm just going to jump ahead here so you guys get a few more snapshots, but you see a lot of it is like that. Most units of instruction usually will have anywhere from 1 to 2 or 3 little assignments in there. Some will have more at varying point values. What I strongly suggest is when you look at your assignments, and some people kind of freak out for this, is look at the due dates and plan yourself out. One way, if you want to get an overview of the due dates, remember you can come back here and you can go to where the syllabus is, and I have that same table that I had in the syllabus, which shows an overall breakdown of what I think the due dates will be for the course. Now, notice I say I think, because sometimes they change. So sometimes we're rolling along and I'm like, oh, that's not going to work because we didn't cover that yet, so I change it. Right, so that's something to watch for. But this is a really good rough roadmap and should come real close. E? Absolutely. You can turn it in right now if you want, if you have it done. I'm okay with that. There's no harm done in turning it in advance. In fact, that from my perspective, having been a student, it's like if you can cross something off your list, if it's easy to do it, so you don't have that pressure of like worrying about a deadline. But yeah, great question. Yeah, no penalty for turning it in early, ever. The other thing I have posted in here as well, and this is kind of a more to share my information, which is also in the syllabus. So like, how do I know how to email my instructor? Well, look in the syllabus, that's one thing. Or you can come here and look at this instructor information post. Now, this is a graphic, by the way, so you can't actually click on these links. But my email address, my Zoom room, my phone number are all here. But more importantly, my academic schedule is in here. So if you guys are looking to meet with me at some point in time, this kind of gives you a snapshot of where I am when. So it looks like Monday mornings and afternoons, I'm on campus here in Racine. I'm also on campus Wednesday afternoons. These are online courses typically, and these courses here will happen out at the IMET Center in Sturtevant. So, and some of you might be signed up for my Python classes, I'm thinking. Okay, I'm not sure if it's the Thursday or the Wednesday class, but I'll probably see you there. That class is a lot of fun. I really like that one a lot. And then I have all these online sections that I teach as well. And then some of them have Zoom sessions, some of them don't. It depends on what you're enrolled in. For those of you that are in the Python classes, I don't know if you signed up for the face-to-face or the Zoom version, but I just want to let you know the reason that we even have a Zoom version for those classes is because we're limited to 12 people in the classroom, so normally it's 18. And so they allow, I think now up to 20 by adding, 8 more in Zoom. And if we find that we have room in the classroom, you're always welcome to come. I'm just putting it out there. You'll also notice these little office hour times. So I'll be on campus, around noon on Wednesday if you just want to stop in. And usually I'll do my office hours right in the classroom. It just turns out my Wednesday class is in the same room. So I'll probably be sitting here at that time. You just walk in. If I'm not here, knock on the door, I will be here. Same thing happens with office hours here, but these office hours will be at the IMET Center in Sturtevant. You're always welcome to come out there if you've never been there. There we operate in the data classroom, which is room 110 if you're taking note. Or just reach out to me and I can guide you to get there. But I think that's all pretty helpful information. All right, let's turn our attention now back over to Unit 1 and actually dig into the material. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up this PowerPoint, and I'm using it more as a guide than anything else. There are a bunch of slides in here. No, I do not intend on talking over every single one. We'd be here for days. So I want to hit highlights and hit important topics is what I'm doing. You're noticing, I'm doing this PowerPoint, and right away a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm going to fall asleep. Please don't. I'll try to keep you awake. The other thing is I'm not always a huge fan of going into presentation mode when I'm full screen with it, because I feel this mode just allows me to move a little bit faster. The PowerPoint is there for the taking, and it will be for every chapter. So if you, for example, I get this effect from people, they read the book and it's like, man, it didn't resonate with me for whatever reason. The PowerPoints have a lot of the same material. And then most of my lectures that I have recorded or I am recording are me talking over the PowerPoints and demonstrating what the PowerPoints are talking about. And, so that's why, we try to hit all bases, basically. So some people can read a book and go, oh, I get it, I can do it, right? Other people, they have to watch somebody do it. That helps them. And other people need different techniques. It's the listening part of it. So everybody's got different learning styles, and we try to cover them all, And so whatever works best for you is what you should do. In terms of the stuff that they have here in this chapter, in particular, these are the main topics. What you get, just kind of read those real quickly. All right, and we start talking about, oh my God, what is the internet? Okay, so in the most simplest of sense, when we are using computers, and we're all sitting in a lab here today, and all of our computers are connected to the internet. And the truth is, we're connected to the gateway network, right? Whether it's Wi-Fi or hardwired, and then that network is connected to the outside world. Once we leave the building, the traffic leaves the building, then it goes out onto the internet proper. The internet really is the connections between all the networks. So Gateway's got its own campus network, and then that campus network connects to the other campus networks and any other organization or person that is connected to the internet. And in principle, we can kind of connect to any machine that allows us to connect to it and exchange information. And it's really kind of a powerful thing. The internet's been around for kind of a long time, and a lot longer than people realize. And it blew my mind when I started researching it and discovering, really, it's been around that long? Because the impression that we have, at least as general consumers, is that the internet started in the mid-90s, right? That's when people started to get online, because that's when we started to get our AOL and our CompuServe and our bulletin board services, et cetera. And another really big thing happened in 1995, and that was the release of Windows 95, which bundled into it a web browser and the tools to be able to connect to the internet through a phone line, right? And so people would buy a brand new computer and it said, oh, connect to the internet. Yeah, I'll do that. And then all of a sudden they're online and the explosion happened. But in reality, the internet's been around since 1969. And that's kind of a mind blow, because you're like, wow, that's a really long time. I mean, they were surfing back in 1969? Nope. That's not how they didn't conceive of surfing yet. But they were able to take computer systems and remotely connect them to each other to exchange information. And the first internet connection that happened was between a machine at UCLA Berkeley and Salt Lake City's university. I forget the name of it there. But they basically set up these really primitive routers. The routers were so huge, they were the size of a refrigerator, just to give you an idea. Not the little box that you have from Time Warner or whatever. But they were able to form a connection between the one machine at Berkeley and the other one in Salt Lake City and attempt to log into the machine. And what's really fascinating about the story, and there's great videos about this out there that you can look up, is the people who developed the technology. I mean, this is cutting edge stuff, right? It's never tried before. The way that it worked is they got the connection going. It's like, okay, we're connected. And just to make sure everything was working, they were on the phone at the same time. So they're talking to each other, and it's like, okay, we're connected. This is so cool, you know? And then they're like, all right, I'm going to try to log in. So they type, and the command that you would type to log in back then was login. That was a word, and you'd press enter, and you would do your login. And so they typed the letter L. Did you get the L? Yep, we got the L. Did you get the letter O? Yep, I got the O. And then they typed the letter G, and everything crashed. It failed, right? So the first message that went across the internet was low, L-O. And there's actually, there's even a Netflix show on this. Lo and behold is kind of like the thing, because that was the first message that went across the internet. They did eventually get the technology working, and they were able to log in from one machine to another. So what can you do when you log into a different machine? Well, you can run whatever software is on that machine. So the thinking was, here we are in Berkeley, and we have an engineering computer, and you guys are over there, and you have a weather computer, and I want to log into that weather computer to get some data, but we don't have that same software, so I can remotely log in, do my stuff, just like I was sitting there, and do miraculous things. Now, of course, over time, that connection grew and evolved. And it really, at first, was just education, government, and military, and some high-end corporations that were part of like the military industrial complex that had access to these systems. And so it was basically a private network. So they were privatized connections that the public could not get into. So the people that worked on these systems were like, well, this stuff is all cool, but we need to be able to get online too. So what the people did in the 70s, the same people that developed the internet, is they were like, well, we can get online too. Why don't we just figure out how to make a modem, copy the router, and we'll just route the traffic over the public network, the public phone lines. So they hand hot-wired modems to connect to computers, so they would convert their digital signals on the computers to analog stuff that would carry over the phone lines. And so we would modulate it to go over the phone lines and then demodulate it, and that's how we get the word modem, by the way, so that they could send the traffic over the phone lines, but it was done in a fashion that wasn't like full-time online. It was like whenever you would dial up, the system would connect and you would send out all your information, and you would get offline because phone calls were expensive, especially long-distance ones. But they ended up forming a couple of really important network constructs independently of the main network. So much so that the traffic became so prolific that the people in the main part of the network go, what's going on here? Where's all this traffic coming from? Well, we have this like other phone network, and they ended up merging them together, and that's when really the term internet came to be. And so most of the people who were originally getting on the internet that were more on the consumer or education level tended to be coming in through dial-up, right? And it really was only just about 10 or 15 years ago that people started to get broadband at home. Those types of connections were super expensive. We take them for granted now. Like you have your DSL or your AT&T or your Spectrum, those types of services, heck, even our phones are super high bandwidth compared to anything they were dealing with back then. What really kind of turned the corner into the World Wide Web is this person here, Mr. Tim Berners-Lee. He worked at this organization, CERN, which is the Center for Advanced Research Projects in Switzerland, right? Now, CERN is the place where they have built this like mile-long circular particle accelerator. You guys maybe have seen stories about this. So all these like cutting-edge scientists from all over the world, even back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, were all working there collaboratively. So an international team of scientists. And they would all be doing their research and studies and whatever, and they're all using different computer systems. And Tim Berners-Lee, working in this group of people, is like, well, you're working on AT&T Unix, you're working on some sort of IBM thing, you're working on a whatever, but I want information from your machine, and you want information from my machine. So he figured out a way. He wrote a piece of software that was able to connect the concepts that they were looking for to whatever the resource was without having to know the IP address or the login information. It was just kind of a direct link. So he created what looked like a green screen browser. So it wasn't graphical. He created a green screen browser that allowed you to create web pages that would have symbolic links to internet content. Mr. Tim Berners-Lee is, we hear like Al Gore invented the internet. No, folks. Mr. Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, the concept of taking a thought and being able to link from anywhere to anywhere without having the technical pieces to make it happen. His contribution is absolutely huge. He never made any money from it and refuses to make money from it. Contrast that with people like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs that made billions of dollars. This is arguably a much more important contribution than anything that those guys put forth. Anyhow, his technology, and he developed a browser called Lynx, Lynx is the browser. That concept was then picked up by some other people at this location here, the National Computing Supercomputer Association or something like that. And this organization has its basis in Springfield, Illinois. Very interesting, and here's where it circles home. A couple guys from Wisconsin, right? So hometown boys, were studying there and came up with a way to convert what Tim Berners-Lee came up with and turn it into a graphical browser called Mosaic. This is in your book. So the first one that operated inside of a window, and I could use a mouse to move around and click on a link. And eventually they figured out how to put images in there too. And those people ended up, when they were done with school, starting a company called, I'm looking at you, maybe Netscape. So Netscape is the original commercial web browser for people and is now known as Firefox, by the way. So a lot of our stuff came from there. And it's really kind of cool that those people were from Wisconsin that came up with this idea. We never give ourselves kudos, but there you go. So we came up with some pretty important stuff. Of course, from there on in, this is early 90s by this point. Windows 95 comes out, they come out with Internet Explorer, and then the browser wars started happening. And at the time, what I thought was really interesting is Microsoft argued that, hey, what's wrong with the browser being part of the operating system, right? And Netscape, they went to court over this, and Netscape said, well, you're destroying our business. If you include it in the operating system, where are we at, right? And Microsoft ended up losing that lawsuit, believe it or not. But in essence, now I look back and I go, no, wait a second, they were totally right. A browser is like the first thing that we use when we turn on a computer, right? Most of the stuff we do is in a browser. So having one included in the operating system is as important as a text editor or a document editor, or a video player or something like that. I think it's pretty interesting to look at. So, here they have kind of like how this all kind of propelled itself. So it started with some usage, went through the CERN thing. Personal computers started to get affordable, graphical operating systems, etc. And now we're in the age that we are in today. Now, given that most of you shared your age, right? So I have like a picture of how old you guys are. All of you were born during the internet era, just like my children, right? And so they grew up in a world where it's like internet was just there, like electricity or the telephone. But I come from a world where that was not the case. You know, we barely had a telephone. You know, 3 channels of TV. You know, when I was a kid. What time we got cable or whatever. You know, and some people embrace and some people don't. So sometimes you'll look to older generations and they don't get it because they didn't grow up that way. You guys, it's part of who you are. You just expect the internet to be there. So really, you know, that introduction thing that we did, one question I sometimes ask students is, what was the first time you ever touched a computer or got on the internet? Right? And usually they happen at the same time. And I think back to my children, my son was like operating the computer and like surfing and stuff before he was 3, you know? And maybe many of you are the same way. For me, it was like when I was in my 20s. That's right. Yeah. It's like, wow, a computer. Wow, you can connect it to other computers? Yeah, it was pretty miraculous. All right, so we got the World Wide Web. I'm kind of skipping over a few slides here. And so they talk about the growth of the internet and how prolific it became. And this is a really interesting statistic, and I'm glad they updated it in this edition. And they show the percentage of the global population using the internet. So back in 1995, when the revolution kind of started from a consumer standpoint, less than 1% of the people on planet Earth were using the internet. Fortunately, I was one of those, right? Because at the time, I was just finishing up my grad degree. I was working at a university in the tech department. I set up the internet servers and the emails, you know, all that kind of stuff. Very interestingly, our whole campus connection back then was 56K. It was like a dial-up line, and the whole campus ran on it. So if you guys ever complain about, you know, your bandwidth at home, you know, there was a day. But then look at how the numbers increased. Within 5 years, 6%. 5 years later, a tripling. And now we're at the point in 2019 that we're talking the whole world population, old, young, third world, first world, the whole shebang, close to 60% of the planet is online. Do you know what allowed the numbers to really grow really rapidly? Pretty much from, you know, once we got past this point, you know what made it grow really rapidly? Mobile devices. Yeah, that's it, right? So talk about an interesting technology. It's not that we didn't have mobile phones or personal digital assistants prior to that point, but when did the first smartphone come out?
Technically, well, there was some before the iPhone, I forgot that, but basically 2007, I think.
Yeah, 2007, like 2008 or 2009, it was catching on. So from the standpoint, you know, we look at it historically, let's say it's 2007, we're at about the 15-year point. And in less than 15 years, is there anybody here that does not have a smartphone? Right, right? And now, I mean, everybody has one. Heck, my mom has one and she's 87 years old. Doesn't know how to use it, but she has one, right? So we went from like 0 to everybody carrying the internet in their pocket in a really short period of time. And this is where most of the surfing happens now. I went to a conference in 2014. It was sponsored by Google and Apple. And the point of the conference was SEO and Google search results. That was the point of the conference. And the Google people brought forth some really interesting statistics. So in 2014, they had determined that 70% of the surfing at home was happening on mobile devices, even if they had a desktop computer connected to the internet. And I thought that was really profound. So you're sitting on the couch watching TV, you're not pulling out your laptop to get online, you're on your phone. That's in 2014. The rate is even higher now. It's somewhere around 85% of home surfing. So you're sitting at home. What are you surfing with? Probably your phone is your number one thing. So when we create content for the web, what kind of machines do we work on? We work on these big screen desktops, laptops, multi-screen, and we design for these big screens. But the reality is, people look at it here, and things are changing because of this. Most apps are delivered here, most web content is delivered here, so this is our number one target platform, right? Even though mine's cracked and broken and needs replacing, still, that's our number one target platform. In countries, if you look at these statistics and you look at countries like the United States or the European countries or some of the Far East countries that have a lot of technology infrastructure, the adoption rate is really, really high, where I think 80 to 90% of most adults are on the internet with their phone, like 95% plus are on the internet somehow, right? And can we even imagine what would happen if like the internet was shut off here in the United States? What would we do? Yeah, good question, right? All right, I'm going to kind of move forward here, and I'm going to talk about a really important website and concept. You see, I am skipping a couple slides, but you can read about those in the book. There's this organization called the W3C. So the moment we started getting the internet and it became prolific, somebody figured out, well, if we're creating web pages, Microsoft uses its own rules for their browser, Netscape uses their own rules for their browser. We need a standard. So they came up with this organization called the World Wide Web Consortium, which still exists to this day. And that organization is responsible for setting the standards for the languages that we use on the web, including HTML and CSS. So the version that we're going to learn is called HTML5, and that standard was put into official usage in January of 2014. And so we're really, in principle, we're coming to the sunset of that standard. So I don't know if we're going to have an HTML6 or whatever, but this organization sets the standards. And this organization also offers something else that's pretty interesting. And they have this website here called W3 Schools. And this is a hugely important website for this class and for any web developer. Because the point of it is the organization that set the standards has a website where they show you how to use them. So anything you want to know about HTML, CSS, and you know what? A whole bunch of other languages too. You guys seeing this? They're all available here with a complete breakdown of what every HTML tag does and how to use it with examples. And I'll just show you really quickly. Like if you come in here, and for example, they show you how to build a basic web page here. And one of the things they do is like, hey, try it yourself. Hey, I sure will, right? So here's my code over here. And then I can come over here and type in a bunch of whatever. And then I hit the run button and it shows up on the other side of the screen. So you can type your code and see your result. And they have that for just about every aspect of the language. So all the stuff that you see here, a lot of the stuff that we will cover in this class is available here. And so like if you were looking at HTML tables, here's the code for doing a table. You can try it yourself. It is a reference. I'm going to tell you what, I've been teaching this stuff for a long time. I've been working it professionally for a long time. I still come here all the time to look stuff up, because I'll tell you why. There's no way on earth you're ever going to remember all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff you will, and then you'll hit something obscure and go, oh, how do you do an iframe without a border? I was doing this at home the other day. I'm like, I don't remember. So I just went to W3 Schools, looked it up, and there it was. And I was done. So this is probably, in terms of a reference, one of the most important websites out there, W3 Schools. And I would bookmark that one or write it down or remember it, or just remember W3 Schools. I'll say it over and over again. One of the most important sites that you will visit. Going back here, they start talking about accessibility issues. And this is a big issue now too, because we get a lot of people, and look, I'm not picking on you, but like if you look at Luke's screen, he is really zoomed in because he needs to be, right? I've been pretty fortunate in my life. I don't have to wear glasses or contacts. Okay? There was a point in time where I almost did, and I started wearing reading glasses, got my eyes tested. My doctor said, you know what? You're right on that verge. If you get a prescription, you're probably always going to need one. You're better off just training your eyes. And there's some tricks that you guys can do. And this is, I'm giving you guys some helpful tips because I'm one of you, right? So spend a lot of time on the screen, and here we are with our focus set to about 18 inches from the screen. And so our eyes are locked into this focal point. So if you can just take your eyes away from that screen and look somewhere a little farther away, or if you're fortunate enough to sit by a window and look off to the horizon, so your eyes get the exercise of changing focal length, it's a huge thing. Another thing to do too is get a good quality monitor. Don't buy the cheapo monitor. Buy that high refresh rate gaming monitor with a great video card and set that refresh rate high and make it big and bright and high contrast. Don't struggle to see. If you're struggling to see, you're hurting your eyes. And I have this policy now that if I'm looking at something and I can't read it, I don't force my eyes to try. I either increase the light or turn on my phone and magnify it. And hopefully that'll help you guys out. So I know everybody's got different issues that way, but accessibility for vision is one thing, right? But you guys know that blind people surf the web? How do they do that? What's the technology that enables that? It's called screen readers. So they have screen readers that will just read the content on a web page to them. Isn't that interesting? And if you ever do any professional work for any government related website, any keys, Mary? Give me just a moment. If you do any professional work for any government related website, you have to do work that allows for people that are hard of seeing, hard of hearing, or a bunch of other disabilities. You know, the ability to make high contrast, larger fonts, or what different languages. Those are all really huge concerns. I'm going to take a really quick break, and in fact, why don't we do a quick 5-minute break because somebody's asking for some help out here, and we'll come back and pick up where we left off. So see you in 5. All right, so I'm going to skip forward a couple of slides here once again. And there's this concept here, and there's a link that you guys can follow and read, but the government has some guidelines for what we call universal design for web. And we are, in some cases, a lot of the websites that you go to are already set up this way. And the whole point is really to make sure that there's a standard out there. And usually the government sets these standards because they have to be able to provide information to as many people as possible. But they have strategies for achieving that, which you can read on this website. Since we are learning rudiments in this class, it's not really a super huge concern. But when you get into doing professional work, there's people who make entire careers of just making sites accessible to people who need that. And therefore entire career paths. All right. Now we talk about the internet and how computers connect together, and here's kind of one of your classic little diagrams of what we think of as the internet. Usually when we're connected within our home environment or in a campus environment like we are here, we have a bunch of physical machines and we connect to a switch or a router that's sometimes wireless. And in this case, we got to go out in the hallway and see the machines that we're connecting to. So all the Wi-Fi that's in here, we have, I think, an access point in every room here. It all terminates back to that closet and then connects to the rest of the campus and then goes out to the internet. And the internet's often represented as a cloud, but that's a real common type of network configuration. We have a couple different things, a LAN, we say a local area network, that's usually the stuff that's attached, like for example, on this floor would be considered a LAN. A wide area network is if we look at Gateway's infrastructure as it connects from campus to campus. So our networks here are connected to all the other buildings, and to all the other campuses. So if I'm sitting in Kenosha, I can log into the servers here or vice versa, or connect and send information. That's a wide area network that's separated by, a large geographic area. We talk about the internet, and they do have, and I don't know if this link will work, but we'll try it. We'll just copy that, see if I can bring it up in a browser. And they have kind of, maps of like the backbones of the internet. And we kind of think that the wires go everywhere, but the truth is that's not really how it operates. Why do we have like really good bandwidth here in our area? Well, the one answer is we're near Chicago, and we're also near the bottom of Lake Michigan, and they're probably not running too many wires through the lake. And so because Chicago's got a huge population base, it's a transportation hub, it's a highway hub, all that stuff. It's also a communications hub. And we have some of the best internet on the planet in this part of the world. We are really truly spoiled. That's why it always freaks me out that we have people that live in Bristol and they can't get internet, because we're right here. It's everything's right here. Why do they not have internet? But there are parts of the country that really do not have it. So what do you do if you live in those parts of the country and you don't have good internet, right? Well, one option that some people turn to is satellite internet. If you watch like these weird Alaska shows where somebody's living on their own up by the Arctic Circle, and it's like, wait a second, how do they have a computer and getting online? Well, they have a satellite dish. There's a lot of latency there, but it does work. But there are some main wiring hubs, and it doesn't really not make a lot of sense why they are where they are. So large population centers will have great bandwidth. The only other part of the country that I've been to where I was more impressed with the bandwidth than it is around here is New York City and Seattle, two places that I've gone to where I was on 3G on my phone, and I was like, holy cow, is this fast? This is 3G, it's because the network underneath is so powerful. But I think it's kind of interesting to look at those things. Absolutely. A lot of the stuff that we do in this class revolves around this really weird concept. And the concept is when we're surfing the internet and we type in a web address in the browser and hit enter, we are connecting to a server somewhere. Like when we work here in class and we connect to Apollo, which we're going to do pretty soon, we're connecting across the hall, right? And so that's our server. Our machines are the client. But when we write code in this class, we are writing for the client, not the server. So writing for the server comes in later classes. And so what we are going to do here is what we call client-side programming. So stuff that works in the browser. So you don't need a server to make it work. And HTML and CSS are client-side technologies, as is JavaScript. So they don't require a server to operate or any special tools, which is kind of an interesting aspect of it. All right, so let's fast forward. We're talking about various protocols that run over the internet. And internet protocols, for example, if I look at my web browser right now, wrong one, let's try this one. And you look here, in the search bar, and very often, if we're going to a website, we type HTTP, right? And HTTP has a meaning. What does HTTP stand for? Does anybody know?
Hypertext something.
Yeah, good guess. It's Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which means there's a rule set that was set by the W3C for how we communicate technology over a network connection to bring stuff up in a web browser. There's a rule set for it and a transfer protocol for it. And so HTTP and HTTPS are the two main ones we use on the web. What does the S stand for? Secure. So whenever, you see this URL I have kind of stuck on the screen here, and it's trying to go to Facebook, and that S in there indicates that it's secure. And if I did execute and go to Facebook, you'll notice that the lock is locked, indicating that it is indeed secure. So you never want to put your web address, or your credit card information into a browser that's not secure. Even if it's HTTPS, sometimes that lock is not locked. Kind of an interesting little tidbit. All right, not to go to Facebook, but to get back on track here and try to finish off these topics. The one that we are going to focus on quite a bit is this one. And during our next session, so I'm probably going to have to just do this. I'm looking at the time. I don't think we're going to be able to get to it today, realistically. But this is one that we will learn pretty early on. So let me talk about first what it's used for. File Transfer Protocol, or FTP, is the predominant way that people who do web work take the files that they've worked on their local machine, upload them to a server so that the world can connect to it. So if you create a web page on your machine, then you FTP it to the server, and then other people can see it too. File Transfer Protocol is designed, it works over the same internet connection, but it's designed specifically to move files, not to deliver web traffic, and is more efficient at doing so than the other protocol, which is why you still use it. In many paths of study, so if you went to like some schools and studied these topics, they would teach you how to make web pages, JavaScript, program, all this stuff. And then at the tail end of the program, they might introduce you to FTP. Here, let's try putting it on the server and see what happens. Our mindset here at Gateway is very different, because this is something that you must do as a professional. So instead of waiting until like the end of the course or 3 courses from now, we do this right away in Web 1 because it's such an essential skill. So as we start out creating web pages, what's going to happen is this. Your first assignment does not have to be uploaded to the server, which is the HTML basics assignment in Unit 2. But from there on in, to turn in your homework, you will upload it to the server and send me a link. You won't send me files, you won't zip it or anything like that. You will actually put it on the server, give me a link to your work, and I'll look at it in my browser, right, like a real web developer. And this skill here, the ability to use FTP, is a required skill for a web developer. So our philosophy is you're learning it right away. So even if you only take this one course, you can go to an employer and say, yeah, I know how to FTP. Yeah, I've done that. You know? And that's another hurdle that you don't have to cross because you've already done it. You don't have to be intimidated by it. All right, so they talk about all these different internet protocols. And a couple of other things here that are important. And I think this is really kind of an interesting aspect of networking and computing, is the fact that when they figured out all these internet connections, they had to come up with a way to make sure that the traffic is going to the right machine. So they came up with an IP address. And a lot of you guys are familiar with this already, because when you connect up your devices, you have to get an IP address to get on a network. And all those IP addresses are numbers. Right? Great, you know, if you're really good at remembering 216.58.194.46, great. I know some of the IP addresses on my home network, but beyond that, I'm not going to memorize what it is for Google or Yahoo. So we came up with this system, not we, but they came up with a system called the domain name system, which allowed people to use plain English words to allow us to be translated into the IP address where the machine actually resides. So when we go to a browser and we type google.com, it goes to a server, a DNS server, either here on campus or out on the internet, and says, where's Google? Oh, here it is, 216.58.194.46. And if you don't believe me, take that IP address and type it into a browser, and take you to Google, which is kind of interesting. So that way we don't have to memorize the numbers. And these constructs here are known as domain names. So that's a domain name. The other aspect of the domain name is what we call the top level domain, which is, you know, .com or .edu or .biz or whatever. You know, and now they've come up with this system as well where you are allowed to do custom domain names. And a lot of people are starting to switch to them. Really great example. The Bucks play at the Fiserv Forum. You know what the website address for the Fiserv Forum is? Fiserv.forum, not .com, .forum. Isn't that cool? And that's kind of a thing that's happening now. And if you have enough money, another thing you should know is you can buy your own top level domain. So if you have that kind of vanity and whatever, go for it. All right, so there's the whole top about the top level domains. The other interesting thing is we also have country domains. So every country on planet Earth and there's 174 or 75 of them, have a 2-letter extension for their particular country. Some of these are really easy to figure out. So what's .jp? .uk? England? What's the United States? Well, there's a .us. Nobody uses it, but there's a .us. Um, and those are kind of fascinating. The real interesting one is the .tv, which I forget what the name of the country is. It's like a tiny island nation in the Pacific. And their whole business is selling .tv top level domains to people. And they were making money off of that for a while. I think that's going to kind of dry up on them now. But the domain name system really does drive that system. Now let's switch over our talk to talking about some of the languages that we're going to learn and where they come from. The first thing that we're going to set down and learn here is how to code in HTML. So how to create the basic structure of a web page. And that acronym HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, guaranteed to be on the midterm and final exam. That's a guaranteed question. You need to know that acronym. And really all HTML is, and I'm just going to give you guys a really quick example of this, is here's my silly personal homepage. And if I right-click and view the source of my homepage, you can see the code I use to create it. And this is the beauty of the web. Any web content that's in a browser, you can do that, right-click, view page source. The code that created the page cannot be obscured from you. This is one of the fascinating things about the web that makes it so much different than other areas of coding. If I have an app on my phone, I can't go view source. Let's see the code that was used to make that app. That's hidden from me. But in the web, whatever appears in the browser, whether it was generated by a human or a machine, is clearly there to see. Yes?
You can kind of hide it though, like with or you can have a query list or something that the user can't see.
You can. You can also hide the code that generated the code. So like one thing that you guys will learn, initially you write your HTML and you can see it, but when you get to the later levels of coding, you write what we call server-side code that writes the HTML for you. That's kind of a mind bender. And so people don't really see the logic that created it, but they still see the output of what's putting it on the screen. And I think that's really, truly fascinating when you start to think about it. And why this is such a cool technology to learn. It's so easy to learn, at least initially, is because you have this capability of being able to see it, and it cannot be obscured from you. And so often you can go to a website and go, wow, that's really cool. How did they do that? And if you're clever, you can kind of figure it out just from looking. So I think that's kind of a fascinating little piece. But the thing that kind of blows my mind about it is when you start to look at HTML, you'll notice some commonalities. So I'm just going to kind of give you an example here. So these are tags, and whenever we develop tags, like here, for example, is a hyperlink. And so this is the beginning part of an anchor tag with the link, the text that we're linking, and the closing of the tag. So HTML has this encapsulation approach. If I have a piece of text on the screen, I wrap tags around it that can either make it a link, make it bold, italics, apply a style to it, make it a paragraph, whatever I want to make it. I can also do the same with images and other things. And that is called a markup language. And it does not come originally from the screen world, but it actually originally comes from the print world. So back in the early 80s, we started to see this transition where big newspapers who used to hand set all the type for printing a newspaper. If you can imagine this, they would take little pieces of lead type and put them in these machines, secure them, and then ink them up and print the newspapers. So all the words on the page, somebody had to like individually put every letter on that thing. Then they came out with electronic prepress. So they were able to take whatever documents they were typing electronically and send it to the press electronically. But if you look at a newspaper, there's headlines, there's bold, there's italics, there's captions, there's all sorts of stuff. And so they came up with this thing called the SGML, Standardized General Markup Language, which allowed electronic prepress to format newspaper content. And when it came time to start to do the same thing for the screen in the web browser, the people who developed HTML looked at this technology and borrowed from it heavily to create HTML. HTML eventually kind of became something else, and in fact, XML is another language we'll talk about a little bit, which is what I call the parent language for all markup languages. So XML is a language that you use these days to create HTML. So it's kind of a weird thing to think about. And every other markup language there is. And HTML is not the only one. You know, there's many markup languages. And therefore, because XML is technically the parent of HTML, you can do just about anything you can do with HTML, you can do with XML also. And the capabilities of XML extend into HTML. And in fact, for a while, we're starting to do development. And this is another exam question, by the way. The book that we have is about HTML5, right? And when you ask people, what's the version of HTML that came before HTML5? Well, duh, it's 4, right? HTML4, no, that's not the right answer. The version that came before is a different technology called XHTML, where they had actually combined XML and HTML together. And that's the one that I did most of my professional work in, interestingly. And the reason they did that is because it allowed a strictness in the code that allowed higher end application functions to work, such as connecting to a database, because those pieces require strict language conventions that were not offered by HTML. So one of the problems of early HTML is that the rules were not strict. So you could kind of write whatever code you want and it would kind of work. And sometimes it would totally horribly break as well because it wasn't well written. So they came up with this technology. So it went actually from HTML4 to XHTML, then it went to HTML5. And the beautiful thing is anything that you've written in XHTML works beautifully in HTML5, and anything that was written in any other version still works in HTML5, although they do like you to follow the standards. And so we're going to teach you standards-based coding to get you kind of on your feet and running with this stuff. So I'm not going to hit too much more here. You know, they talk about here the different versions, and there are draft versions of 5.1, 5.2, and I think at some point they're gonna come out with just a straight up 6. I don't know when that will happen. My anticipation would be within the next 5 years. And there's draft versions out there. All right, so without further ado, I was kind of hoping to do FTP accounts today, but that's not happening. Let's do a little bit of coding. You guys up for that? You want to get your fingers dirty and do a little bit of coding? All right, we're going to start with really primitive tools. So the first tool that we're going to start with is built into your operating system. All right, and we will circle back to this next week, so don't worry about, like, this isn't an assignment. This is just to get your hands dirty. But if you go to your start menu and type the following, Notepad, you're going to notice I have 2 different versions. I have Notepad and I have Notepad++, which ultimately is the software I want you to use initially. But go ahead and launch the regular Notepad software here in Windows. Now, what Notepad is just the most fundamental of text editors. You can't like do bold and italics and any of that kind of stuff. It just gets text on the screen. But you know what? That's all we need to get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to type in the following command. And I don't know if you guys can see this well enough. So and this is one of the reasons I don't like to use this tool is because it's so clunky. That should be a little bit better. Is that better or more? More.
You know, you can use hold the control button and scroll wheel it.
Does it work in Notepad though?
Yeah.
Oh, it does. Okay, thank you. I had this like naive assumption that it doesn't work in Notepad. All right, so here we are, and this is going to be the first line of every HTML document that you create. And let's talk about the anatomy of this first. We start these code pieces by putting in these items here, which are the greater than and less than sign. And those are called brackets when we're coding. All right, so opening bracket, closing bracket. This one special declaration is a byproduct of the parent language XML. And we have to include it in every HTML document. And what it does, its function is to tell the browser what version of HTML we're bringing to it. And then the browser reads it and goes, oh, this is the doc type for HTML5. That's the rule set we're going to follow. And that's how we're going to render your web page. If you omit this, the browser does whatever it wants, which is a dangerous place to be, especially for application building. So you always have to include this statement. The next thing that we add is the core HTML tag, which is just HTML. I do want you to notice that I'm typing these tags in all lowercase. Strangely, when HTML first came out, the rule was the opposite. It was all uppercase. I don't know why they switched it, whatever, but this is the thing. Now, notice that I created an HTML tag, and then a little farther down, I put in the same tag again with the internal contents being prefaced by a /, same as on your question mark key. So what this tells the browser is, this is where it starts, this is where it ends. And on the HTML page, the whole content of everything you do goes in between those two tags. Okay. The next major section of an HTML document, and I'm going to actually indent here to do this, is what we call the head section. And the head section is a place where we put stuff that's important to the web page we're creating, but is not the actual content of what we see on the screen. Right? An example of what goes inside of here could be something like this. And you know, I'm not liking how much it's indenting, I'll be real frank. I probably would indent more like this, you know, just a couple of spaces, not a whole tab. One of the things that we put in here is a special directive that's required by HTML5, which tells the browser which character set we're using, and that is how we're reading the signals from the keyboard to put the characters on the screen. What's interesting about this format, UTF-8, is it actually encompasses most major world languages. So all the English and Latin characters, Greek, Arabic, Hebrew, some Cyrillic. I don't think it does the Oriental languages, but it covers most of those and includes mathematical symbols. Okay. Another thing that we put in the head section is the title tag. Once again, I'm doing this process of opening and closing the tag, and I'm encapsulating the content with the tag. Now this title tag, this is really kind of neat. This controls what appears in the tab in the browser. So when you're looking at a tab, and notice how I'm like hovering here, it says HTML tables. That comes from the title tag of that page. Isn't that cool? So you can control what text appears in that tag. Other things you'll put in the head might be something like CSS connections or styles, JavaScript or connections to JavaScript and other special directives. The next major section of the document is what we call the body section. And the body section will be the part that controls the visible portions of the page, what people see when they go to the website. So once again, I'm opening and closing the tag, and then everything else goes inside. Let's start with a really super basic tag now. So now we're actually going to create content that we can see. And I'm going to start with one, and I'm going to start with a heading tag of level 1. And this is what you're supposed to do the very first time, by the way, is you're supposed to type this. Hello world is the traditional first thing you do in every programming language. It's a custom for geeks, right? You get that first time you're doing the language, you got to do hello world. So I'm putting it in a heading tag, which will make it big and bold on the screen. Right. This is enough for now. This is enough to try it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go up to the File menu and hit Save. And for right now, just for the sake of trying it, this is not homework, by the way. This is just getting our feet wet. Go ahead and save it on your desktop. That's absolutely fine. And in the file name area, type index.html, all lowercase, exactly as typed. Not one letter can be uppercase. You guys with me? And if you want me to write it on the board, would that help? Are you guys okay? So index.html, all lowercase, and save it. Now, if I go to my desktop, which is what I'm about to do now, I'm going to go look for that file, and here it is. And in fact, I'm just going to move it to the middle. So there it is. And you notice that because I added this file extension of HTML, it's telling my operating system, hey, this is a web page file. And notice the icon that it gave it. It gave it the Google Chrome icon, which is the default browser on my system. Now, if I double click that page, it will load up into my browser. Not very impressive, but hey, we did something. Notice that the title up here says, hey, my first web page, just like I typed it in. And if I come in here and right click and view page source, I can see the code that I created exactly the way I typed it. Isn't that cool? Right. So this is getting our feet wet, folks. And you know what? Everything else we do in this class is really just an extension of what we just did. This is a basic structure we'll use for every web page that you do. And then from there, we just add content, we add images, we add links, we make it look pretty, and we make it do stuff. And it gets to be a lot of fun. And you know, if you got like a vision for something to create, it's even more fun, you know, because then the challenge is to create what you're seeing in your head, you know. And I think it's a fascinating process. So, is anybody struggling with this? Is everybody okay? All right. What I am going to do is I am going to stop the recording here, so the recording will end here. So that ends our Unit 1 lecture topics in brief format. So people listening to the video, we will talk more next time.